Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning, morning.
Hi, Kate. I'm Scott. It's Monday morning, 9:11 a.m. and really looking forward to starting my week with you both. So I'll just set the scene a little bit and then I'll let you introduce yourself. So these creating the conditions conversations have been going a couple of years now, very much set up in response to people asking, what are you doing? Why are you doing things differently? What does that look like? How do I do it? What are the sort of challenges you come up along the way? And we've probably recorded, Scott and I, about 7 or 8 of these conversations now, and we're into a little spin-off series around some of the topics and things that we know really matter, and also in an attempt to perhaps people might be getting a little bit tired just listening to Scott and I. We've decided we're going to bring in some different voices. So you're the second different voice, Kate.
Exciting.
So really looking forward to doing a bit of a trip down memory lane with you and thinking about the work we've done together over the years.
Yeah.
So Scott, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Scott Hartley, Director of Press Red, and Hayley and I have been having these conversations for a while now.
And Kate.
Well, hello. My name is Kate Cocker. I'm the founder of the Presenter Coach. And really what the Presenter Coach is all about is turning leaders predominantly into great communicators, because we have a really inherent belief that great communication will change your life, including the way that you talk to yourself. And that a lot of the problems that we face is often because of communication, not the problem itself. You know, it's not the problem, it's the way it's been miscommunicated or a miscommunication has happened. And so we call ourselves the Presenter Coach because we have a methodology that helps people to really simply prepare for presentations really quickly. When they know it, they can move through it quite quickly. But really it starts with the presentation, because usually that's where you get conscious of how you're communicating. And as you guys know, the presentation really isn't just that one time that you stand on stage at a conference. It's actually walking in a room and having to convince people and change people's minds in your world of change making. You know, you're actually in rooms of people networking, lobbying all of the time. And so the principle that we have, which is called the performance pyramid, helps people to understand who they are, who their audience is, what their message is, and how to tell that well countless times over and over again, so that you're really change making. You know, we want workplaces to be great places to be. We want your lives to be easy as leaders and making change. And so that's really at the core of what we do.
Brilliant. And you are practicing what we preach,
yes,
what we all preach this morning. So just explain what you're doing, particularly for those who might be listening to this as an audio later on.
I know. So a few months ago, we've got a stand-up desk in the office at home, and I got myself a treadmill that goes under the desk. And so any opportunity I have to walk and talk, I take it, because obviously the amount of good stuff that comes from walking is something that I've learned from you guys over the years. So from working with GM Moving over the years. And I thought, no, who better to do this with than Hayley and Scott, and go, look, we've created a condition here. We can move wherever, you know, we're designing movement back into life, right? And that's what this is all about.
Excellent. So we will come back to that in a second, because I'm going to start by asking you about your relationship with movement over your life and currently. But just for the listeners, this is a really relaxed, and for you, this is a really relaxed conversation. We'll take it in all sorts of directions, I'm sure. And I'm going to kind of host the conversation, and Scott's going to then ask us both questions along the way. And that might be in reflection on how we've also worked together in different ways over the years too. So, and am I right in saying it's 8-9 years since you set up the Presenter Coach?
It's 10 years, yeah.
10
so
years.
It's 10 years, probably about 8 or 9 years since I started working with Yvonne, who at the time was CEO of what was then Greater Sport. So, you know, so she sort of was the person that I came out of radio saying, I've got this idea, I think it would really help leaders. And she went, I'll be your guinea pig. And that's where the whole thing began. So yeah, it was a really good way to get into it.
So like most good things, they have a bit of Yvonne Harrison in them.
A bit of Yvonne Harrison and a bit of Hayley Lever these days as well.
That's brilliant. No, actually, I didn't know that. So that's where it started. So so let's go then. So first of all, then, just reflections really on kind of your relationship with movement, and then how that's playing out these days, and perhaps a little bit about then how that's influenced your working with Yvonne, with Yvonne from the off as well, and let's go down that road.
Yeah, so my relationship with movement, I'm very passionate about it, actually. My relationship with fitness and without sounding weird, with my body and what it can do. So when I was younger, I did fall into that pathway of playing sport on a Saturday morning at school. And my school was a private school that had gone public, but it kept some of its old traditions. And one of those old traditions was we played lacrosse. So we were a comprehensive school that played lacrosse. I then ended up going to Loughborough University. I'm like, there's an episode of Alan Partridge, you know, the Steve Coogan, that episode of Alan Partridge where he went, I went to Loughborough University, did media studies or something like that. That was me. So I did English and history of art at Loughborough University. And all through my teens, I'd wanted to play for England. I'd been going through all the processes. I'd been doing trials and things like that. And I hit kind of my final year, if you like, at university. Loughborough, we get to a really good place. We win Booster, and I'm on a team with loads of England players. And one day, one of them, Emma, my captain, calls me and went, "Do you want to play for England at the weekend?" And I went, "Yeah." So I got to play for England at like quite a high level for lacrosse. We did a tournament in England, Wales, Scotland tournament, and then that was enough. That was it. I was like, I've done that now. That was all I needed to do. And it was actually really depressing. You know, I got through all of those trials, and actually the way it came about was my mate on the team phoned me and said, "We've got a place, do you want to play?" And I was like, absolutely do I. And I've got a cap and everything, which is amazing.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of that's who I am and who I was when I was a kid. And I remember talking to someone about it at a function, and he said, it's really good to exercise when you're younger, in your 20s, because it'll help you in your 40s, 50s, 60s. So even back then, there was this sort of understanding that movement was really important. My parents are not sporty at all. I was with them at the weekend. They were like, I don't know where you lot got it from, you know. But yeah, so we were quite sporty. And then when I left that culture, and we can talk about Loughborough culture if you want, because if you want somewhere to go where movement is part of your life, you know, there's no way you're skipping a run every day when you open your curtains of the campus and there are people running everywhere. And at the time, no one smoked. So, because we're all, you know, I was, you know, I'd be drinking with all of these. You'd be out in the pub, and there'd be all like, I've forgotten her name, the runner, Paula Radcliffe. My first night in Loughborough, Paula Radcliffe's at the bar. So it's like, you know, it's a really bizarre culture because you're in this kind of really fitnessy movement space anyway. So, so from there, I trained as an aerobics instructor. I was really into it. You know, I'm not your stereotypical, oh, I found movement and it really helps me. I literally was like, oh no, I need the sport. I need the fitness in my life. I like the structure. I like the athleticism of it. I like that when you train, you learn. If I train and train and train and train, I'm going to be better. You know, I loved all of that. And actually, even if you look at the presenter coach work that we do, it's all performance mindset. It's all, I have courses called Speaker Fit. You know, it's all laced into my world. And then about 10 years ago, I found CrossFit, which appealed to the athlete in me. But now I'm in my 40s, and jumping up and down isn't so good for the cortisol levels. I think we were talking about that a minute ago. It's like just jumping up and down, jumping up and down, jumping up and down, jumping up and down. It's not great. And I was finding that actually it wasn't, the hormones weren't balancing out with that. I now just do 4 times a week, heavy weights, and I'm obsessed with it. And I've just spent 2 weeks now, and I'm walking everywhere. So weights and walking, that's the trick for me. But I just spent 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, I flew to Kuala Lumpur, and then I flew to Sydney for 2 days, and then I flew to Delhi, and then I came back on Friday. And I literally in my head am going, my body can do this because of the fact that I'm strong enough, I move, I do weights, you know, all of that is there and in line for me to be able to do that. And so my relationship with movement, it empowers everything, because I think if I'm fit and I'm moving and I'm strong, then everything else will fall into place. And that's it. And I sleep well as a result. So yeah, so I think, yeah, I'm a big advocate for moving. And so it was really, I guess, because of that sporting background and because of that Loughborough thing, it felt very natural to fall into and with Yvonne and then go from there in terms of how the relationship with you guys came about. And it feels really powerful, I think, the way that the message has shifted. You know, the sport to movement is so important, because it's true that if we want people to move, we can't lace it up in Lycra, you know. We've got to make sure that people understand the power of movement, the power of walking, you know, the power of the relationships that change, or the power of how you feel about your work life because you've got that extra movement in your world. And I've been on a real journey with you, learning about all of that. And, you know, we really, like, the guys at work, my culture at work is like, they go off in the afternoon and they go to the gym. I'm like, yes, go. You know, movement is so important. It's like, that's the most important thing today, is that you get to the gym this afternoon. I know you'll do the work later. You know, it's that sort of thing. So yeah, it's very, very integral to who I am, who my family is, and how my business runs.
It's interesting, actually, because when you started talking about Loughborough there, I was thinking it's a bit of a metaphor in a way for the wider kind of work that we've done over the years. And where my sort of thinking went to is, I know quite a few people who didn't go to Loughborough because because they knew they wouldn't fit in there, because they weren't fit active sporty types. So and we've done some work with other universities around how do you kind of widen the lens on, for sporty universities that are known for being particularly elite sport, you know, how do you help to make visible and talk about a culture that is beyond that as well? Otherwise you're potentially losing some of your best sort of like candidates who, because they don't feel that they could fit in or feel comfortable in a place where everyone's so sporty. So that was interesting, because I kind of feel similar to this whole from Yvonne Greater Sport to GM Moving evolution. So do you want to talk about, I mean, you talked about kind of getting pulled in and working with Yvonne in the first place. I suppose throughout this conversation I'm interested both in what you've learned through that journey about the power of language and communication of this topic, but also the journey you've gone on in terms of building capability, confidence and skills within the Greater Sport, GM Moving and team and our wider partners. So just tell us a little story of sort of very high level, and then Scott, then if you'd be ready to dive in, that journey in those two contexts.
The Yvonne moment was really important to me, because she was aware, she'd worked as a volunteer at Greater Sport and worked all the way up to CEO. And then all of a sudden she's being thrust into these situations where she's having to make the speech, you know, and she was like, I just didn't want the nerves to win. And we just came about, it was right time, right place. I was like, I'm doing this thing. I've got this idea. What do you think? She said, let me be a guinea pig. So I ran the performance pyramid with her the first time. I got her doing all sorts of amazing things and she smashed it. So she was a great, you know, advertisement really for the work that I had too. And then it all just started rolling off there. I remember I rang her and I was like, I've got this idea for Speaker in 6, which is 6 weeks, 6 people. We'll get them up and running as speakers. And then we ran that with the Greater Sport at the time, and then which became GM Moving. And we're still running it today. You know, we've done it recently. We called it Speaker in 7. We've added a bit of extra bits in, but it still works really nicely. What struck me at the time working with Yvonne, and what you have taken and run with, Hayley, as well, is the fact that I think Yvonne at the time had just got everyone together in the room. They'd just all got in the room, and Sport England had given the mandate to get 2 million people moving in Manchester. That was the line, wasn't it? 2 million people moving in Manchester. I was like, I'm in. How do we get that message across? How do we push that forward? And what struck me immediately, and what I loved about the whole process, was the capacity that Greater Sport, GM Moving have to listen and learn. You know, to go, okay, everything from, okay, well, hang on a minute, the sport stuff isn't working. What do we need to do to mean people will walk? And at the time, it was things like for students, you'd put on like selfie walks. So just to get people out and taking pictures and just to get them walking. It wasn't about, right, let's put on a netball tournament. And if you did put on a netball tournament, you were like, right, people can get their nails done in the corner, you know. It was just different ways and different thought processes that all came from almost knocking on doors, talking to people and listening and going, what would work? And I thought that was really amazing. And I really bought into that, because I thought that's such a great culture. You know, that's 8 years ago, and you're still doing it now, all the way through to, if it doesn't work, you know, what's the thing you say? You say, it's the NHS one, the 3 things. If it doesn't work, we talk about it. If it doesn't work, we go, what now? What is it, Hayley? Remind me. It's the what now, how now. I can't remember.
Oh, wow. See, I was thinking, where are you going with this?
The evaluation
what
process.
What happened, so what, now what? Yeah, so it's very much a kind of learn and adapt approach.
What, so what, now what? And I just think, you know, it means that what you actually do is you build partnerships and you create change. And that's the point. And I think so often we think that change, because that's what you've had to do over the last 8 years. You've had to change the way that people are thinking. You've had to change the system here in Manchester, and we see evidence of it all of the time. And you've had to change people's the way they approach movement. And that's not easy. And people think, right, I'm working with a company at the moment and they're just about to launch their 2030 strategy. And it's like, guys, you've got to take this slow. You've got to move people 1 foot at a time rather than try and move them both feet at the time. Because it's so easy to come in and go, this is the direction we're going in. Everybody's just got to come along with us. And that's not how change works. And you are a really good, to us, and I don't know if it feels like this on the inside, because I suspect you're banging your head against the wall a lot of the time. But from the outside looking in, and from the times I get with you, I see the change. And you're a really great cultural example as an organization that to me says this is how you create change. Go.
Well, thank you. Yes, it feels like that. Yeah, it does feel like that on the inside. And that's both exciting and challenging. You know, if you're constantly learn, adapt, change. You know, that's brilliant and challenging. That's why I was hesitating. But yeah, no, that's a really, really good observation about how the work has evolved in that baton pass from where Yvonne started to where we are now, and then how as a team and partners and board members, and you know, we're all having to learn and adapt all the time, and how you develop that learning culture in the organization is key to this, not least because a lot of people who work in this space are like you, have a really positive relationship with movement perspectively and sport particularly, and that you have to confront some realities if you're passionate about this and you deeply believe it matters, to kind of listen and understand, really deeply understand the experiences of people who have been traumatized by PE at school, or who have a really, you know, difficult relationship with sport or movement. So so thank you. That's good to hear as a bit of feedback.
No, I've always appreciated it, and I've always, you know, I work with a lot of different organizations and it's not the same everywhere else, you know, that. And what we end up teaching as communication experts as a team is often you've got to sit in the problem with your customer. You've got to sit in the problem, because so often, even in sales or in customer service, the salesperson or the customer service operator wants to fix it. So there's a problem from the customer, or there's an objection from the customer, and they go fix, and that doesn't work. What works is, okay, tell me more. Let's go through this. What could we do better next time? How do we deal with that? What, you know, and sit in it and listen and understand. And that's what creates collaboration, partnership, and change. And you do it really brilliantly.
I'm going to invite Scott in. He's looking thoughtful. I recognise that look. What are you thinking?
I was pondering a few things. You know, there's been some interesting language and articulation, hasn't there, in that little bit? You know, that journey from sport to movement. You know, Kate used the phrase designing movement back into life earlier, and I've had the privilege of every now and again dropping into something that the two, you know, that you've done, where you've been doing work together, and I'd be really interested in just what's changed, what's shifted for the pair of you, you know, because that team, the way that team now talks about movement compared to how it used to talk about what we were trying to do is really quite different, and I'd be really interested in what has changed. What did it take to change it, and what, you know, and not just the good stuff. What's been really hard, you know, what are we still wrestling with? What challenges do we still face? You know, there's a few questions there, but just getting into the nuggets in the journey, I think is where I'd like both of your views on it, really.
Want to start
going first? I've already remembered about 6 of them as I've been listening. I mean, where I went to, like, straight away when you started to talk about Yvonne, because she is one of the most powerful communicators, and I must have benefited from some of that with her last week, actually, in a meeting we were in together. And I guess, and we are very different, and there's a point to this, which is Yvonne and I have different personalities, different preferences, different ways of being, and different levels of comfort with some of what you might suggest that we do and how we do it. And I can totally imagine Yvonne like going, yes, I'll try that. I'm going to go out there and do that. And
I was like, do it in an American accent. Do it lying on the floor. Yeah, Hayley's like, no. I'm not doing that.
But I think the reason I share that is I think that the work you've done, if I think about people in our team, you've probably worked with 50, 60 people across the team over the years, and all with their own like mindsets, behaviors, preferences, capability, capacity for the thing that I remember that when we were helping with the TEDx talk, and I think it was the first time you made me present to you in a room, do the talk to you in a room, and you asked me on a scale of 0 to 10, how big do you think you're being here, as in kind of like expressive, taking up the space. And I was like, that was excruciating. You made me listen back to it. It was excruciating. I was convinced I was like on the 8 or 9 scale in terms of like how big I was being in that room. And you were just like, yeah, you're 4 tops, and this is something I'd been working with my coach on for a while at this point, not just in presenting but in life, like how expansive are you being, how much space are you taking up, how much voice are you giving yourself. So I just think all of that has probably been, if you were going to talk about some of the kind of the discomfort of this, but supported discomfort, which is what I would describe the way you work with people, get to know them as individuals, as well as the organisation at its work. I think you've absolutely soaked in our challenges of sitting in the problem, as you were just describing, and then what that means for language and what that means for how you communicate. But that supported discomfort to go on an individual and collective journey to communicate for change. And so that's where I've gone to with that. There's loads more I could say, but I'll let you come in.
Well, I went to the TEDx talk as well, because I think that was quite a significant moment for us as a partnership, if you like, because obviously this is a really big moment for you. You're doing TEDx it was Oldham, wasn't it? You were doing. And this is when, and actually this is why it's important, the line designing movement back into life appeared. And it's because you've been doing the work with Nikki. So you've been doing the framing stuff, and I hadn't come across that before. So here I am, and I think you describe me and Nikki in these 2 ways. Like, you say Nikki's safe hands and I'm jazz hands.
Just explain who Nikki is, because we haven't had Nikki on yet.
Yes, I was going to say, so Nikki Hawkins is an expert in framing messaging for change, basically. And so her work is so fascinating. And actually, I'm going to say this is one of the key catalysts for me, was actually, now Nikki and I do work together, and I absolutely love it. I think the pair of us together just, we really advocate for story. We look at the way that things have, how you can create transformation. She's taught me things like, when you're going through change, you can't say not this, but this. You've got to say from to, you've got to talk in that way. She really helps me to understand how the story work that I've done means that I focus things like getting people to tell stories that people move towards, create the light that people can move towards. Don't tell them off, don't tell them what they should be doing, create the light for people to move towards, and that's more powerful. And I've learned all that working with Nikki in her framing workshops, and obviously working with her as a partner in crime now, which is always really good. So I think for me, that designing movement back into life line, which I think came from Nikki, I'm assuming.
It came from the Design to Move report that the Young Foundation did originally, but it hadn't been necessarily brought into, embedded in the work in the way that it needed to be, which it is now. So I think Nikki grabbed it and was like, yes, that's
it. Yeah, that sounds very Nikki to me. She does that. So it's understand when we talk about framing. I think Nikki and I always are having this conversation. Like we regularly ask people to not speak in jargon, and then we go, hang on, story's a jargon word, framing's a jargon word. We've got to practice what we preach a little bit. And to explain framing is about, you come across it every single day in your life. I talk to leaders all the time who maybe have got a problem with their team, and they'll go, and I'll just say to them, what is it you want to say? And they'll do the thing that they should in private. They'd say, well, I just want them to stop interrupting in meetings. And I go, right, okay, let's say this in a way that is framed properly. And that might be the framing of the conversation that sounds like, listen, I need to have a conversation with you about something that I think is impacting the team, but I want to have a really positive outcome to this. So that's your name and label, that's your framing of the meeting. But it's also saying something like positive framing, rather than saying stop interrupting, will you? It's like, it would really help if you practiced waiting for people to finish. You know, it's actually framing it more positively. This works with your kids as well, by the way. So, and for Nikki and the work, when we're thinking of a message, we're often doing things like, when there's the message comes up, we take out words like should, you know, you should be moving more. No, that's not what we say. We're designing movement back into life. That sounds much more positive and a light that people can move towards. So the art of framing is really about taking a message and making it into something that's inclusive, something that inspires, rather than a slap down. It's a positive opening up. And it's an art. It's not easy, but I love it. I love it when we get into the lines and we start digging around in it and we work out the metaphors and all of that. And one thing about designing movement back into life is that, as someone who teaches people to communicate, designing connection back into life is a thing. You know, we're having to do a lot of this now as our world modernizes and we start making things easy. What we're taking away is opportunities for connection. So, you know, yes, we're doing this now, but if you're face to face, we'd have had a chat about something, you know, in between. Whereas we're doing this, we're leaping in and we don't have that opportunity for connection. So yeah, I find myself thinking in that way about my stuff. So, which is really lovely as well.
Scott, why next?
I think it's a great observation.
Yeah, you've lost me. Sorry. It drops out every now and then. What did you get? What did you miss?
No, I don't think we missed. I think we had everything. Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Good. Yeah. Good.
The bit that there's a couple of things I want to come back to. That you've mentioned story there, and the importance of it. Yes, it can be a tricky word for us to understand. I'd just like to pick at that because it's a really interesting bit here emerging, isn't there, around the work that you've done with Nikki around getting the right language, getting the right way to frame the conversations, getting the right way to get people thinking about the work and the change that we're trying to create. And then we've got this support, this support for individuals, this support for team, support for GM moving as an organization, and those two things together feel really important. And I'm intrigued about the role of story in that, and the work that's been done with the team to help them maybe improve the way that they tell stories.
Yeah, it's such a sticky ground, I'm going to say, because, and I think sometimes Nikki and I talk about this a lot. I think we need to work out how we sell it, if you like, if we sell story. I think sometimes when we say story, you need to tell a story, people start thinking, oh, she wants me to do a fairy tale, or it sounds like, oh, I went for a walk with my dog, isn't my dog fun? Oh, you know, it's like, it's actually not that. Story is the word that we use for a lot of things. Like metaphor is really key, example is really key, and narrative is really key. And what we use story to do is get under the jargon and the detail. Let me rephrase that. In fact, it's not about getting under it. It's about inviting people into the detail. Because when we're in this kind of, when we've got a point to prove, you know, all the evidence says we need to move more. All the evidence, look at all of this. And we've gathered the spatial data and we understand the place and we've got the whole system. So you just need to move more. And actually, if you say that, it doesn't really mean anything to anyone, right? Even the people that, you know, sometimes even when you go into the rooms with the politicians, they're all just nodding their heads so that they think they're clever too. You know, we've got to use these big words to be clever. You do, but also most people are thinking about what's for tea tonight. So if we can get into there rather than into, you know, or they've just come out of a meeting where someone's really annoyed them and you're talking to them about spatial data and they're having to go 4 steps before they understand what it is. The power of putting an example to that or an image to that helps people to understand what you're trying to achieve. So a good example is, I remember speaking to someone about sort of getting the, I don't know how to say it, the elderly moving. How do you say it? What's the way to, what's the right word?
Aging.
Pardon?
Active aging.
Active aging, there we go. I'm going to go to see some politicians and talk about the spatial data that we've gathered. I went, stop yourself there. Tell me what you've done. And then they talked about, you know, time in Tameside, where they realised that people were going to A&E rather than to the doctor's surgery, which is at the bottom of the hill. And so they knocked on the doors and said, why are you going to A&E rather than the doctor's surgery? And everybody said, because it's at the bottom of the hill. And so they've now got they've got a doctor's surgery at the bottom of the hill, but they've also got a place that's closer to that top area, so that people who are actively aging can use that, and it's reduced the number of the A&E visits, right? And they're using the local services. That says miles more to everyone than we've gathered the spatial data and here's the system that works, you know? So you're actually digging in and under what's going on. You can use both. That's the thing. I think we advocate so strongly for story. People think I'm not supposed to use the stuff I use, but actually it's an invite into that bigger picture stuff.
I was going to thinking then about there. I'm going to take over the question here and play it back to you two, which is because you two also have, and Nikki, have worked together, and that's been powerful for us in a sense of, for example, Scott's doing a presentation to our team tomorrow on the latest data, and he will do it differently than he might have done it 8 years ago when he first presented to our team on the data, because of the journey that the three of you have gone on. So Scott, I was going to ask you, you know, what's been the influence and impact, and what have you learned over the years about, you're the data guy, but it doesn't on its own, it doesn't do the job, does it?
No, it doesn't. And you know, and it's Kate's point, it's always an and for me. I think the bit that I've learned through hard experience and from being exposed to, you know, the work that Kate and Nikki have done is how to try and bring that information to life with reality. That phrase that Kate's used about inviting people into it, into the story, making that story relevant to what people experience in their life, and so that people can understand the data. That's the bit that I've learned the hard way, I think. And you know, that I see that in myself. I see that in the way that the Outpress Red now try and use data, right? It's about making it connection to people's lives. But there was a phrase, I can't remember what it was earlier, about I scribbled it down, but I can't find it. But it's create the light for people to move towards. I think that there's got to be hope in this. You know, a lot of the data that we end up presenting, we're not presenting it with, you know, from a hope point of view, right? We're usually trying to convince people that they've got a problem. That's the thing that a lot of our work is about. But doing that in a way that is hopeful, that change is possible. That's why the phrase designing movement back into life is brilliant, right? Because it gives you a sense of, we designed it out, we can design it back in. Okay. And that hope bit, I think, is a really important part of our communications, and the bit that I see in the GM moving team. Whilst you might be trying to convince people that they should be taking action, you're also trying to convince people that action can create the change that we need.
And Scott, I remember when I was going to those initial conferences and you were there. You did a good job. You were always doing a good job of telling the story of the data. And I remember I did a day where I came and we talked about the story curve, and we did point, reason, example, point. And you and I stood at that board and you were like, right, where? What do I do? How do I do it? So we've had a good, you know, it helps when you're into it. You know, it helps when you kind of, it matters to you. But even now, I think, you know, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, you know, we talked about those 10,000 steps, didn't we, for a long time? And I think you articulated it really well around, like, kids, the way that kids move. This was 8 years ago. Like, kids should be doing sort of, you were like, it's 60 minutes a day or something like that. But actually what that means is, like, get them out at lunchtime. You know, you were talking like that already. So I think it's nice that you think you've sucked up a little bit more from us. And maybe we can be a little bit over creative at times. But the point is that when you paint pictures in people's minds, you give them the opportunity to make up their own mind, and that's influence. That creates change. If you like, no one in this call, no one listening likes being told what to do, right? If you tell them you've got to go and do 60 minutes, rather than, you know, create a picture, like when you move, this will happen, or, you know, whatever it is, finding a way to get them to make that choice, which is, again, designing movement into life makes you go, oh yeah, right, how can I design it back in? It draws you in, which is what you want.
I've been reminded of a few other uncomfortable moments listening to you both there, but you're absolutely right. I think that and I'm trying to think what if Nick is safe hands and your jazz hands, then what kind of hands is Scott? I'll come back to that later.
He's checking his watch.
Because together you have really helped, you know, along with others, that really helped us with this stuff over the years. And I think, you know, that leaning into it, the way that you described Scott, then how he would, it's that same learning mindset, isn't it? It's constantly learning, constantly refining, adapting. The thing that the other thing that I don't know if this is worth drawing out, but the kind of discomfort in working with you at times has been about that examples point, you know, because you and I have argued, haven't we, about
I know.
One of the other journeys we've been on.
I don't like story. I'm like, what are you talking about?
No, so
Haley's writing poems and telling us stories. I don't like it, which is her reaction to, I'm finding this hard. because the other journey we've been on is to move from, there isn't a one, because we constantly ask for what's the silver bullet, what's the one thing if we did it everywhere it would solve this problem, whether that's by political leaders or human beings craving simplicity. With the other journey we've been on is, this is a whole system approach. It's complex. We need to do all the things, you know, in all the different ways. And I think my resistance to when you've said to me, well, we've got a 10-minute speech to give, we need to get across the journey, the whole sort of system approach, and then you will be challenging me to bring that to life with the example, the story, the make it real. The fear in me is, I don't want to take people back to, well, if we just did this, you know, if everyone did parkrun, or, you know, whatever the example is. But you know, and I've learned so much over the years with you around how to tell the story or give the metaphor or give the example in ways that doesn't take people back to, oh, that's it then, you know, that's the one thing. So thank you. You're welcome.
It's a continual, and I've just been reviewing this morning some presentations that a couple of members of the team are doing, and they're working with you guys on, and I can see it in there. It's just so lovely to see. And here's my 3 stories I'm going to tell, but they're telling them in a systemic way. They're not telling them in a way which is, so you just do this. There's just this one thing. It's really simple, because it's not. Is there anything, either of you, observations, because we've worked on this together and with Nikki around moving from the story of either like changing individuals' behaviour to it's a whole, we need to change the system, or from the silver bullet to the many fires burning kind of thing, many lights shining is a better way of putting it.
Can I share the most powerful thing for me in Nikki's work? I remember she was showing us, I was on one of you, we were working together but not together, and she was doing a presentation to you, a training day to you guys, about the way that we perceive movement to be about willpower and it to be about the individual. And it was the way that like media had talked about, you know, well, I got up and I walked, you know. One of the most powerful things I think that we do now in the training is we'll ask in a room, we'll say, who helped you move today? Who helped you go for a run? And it's this idea that actually there is an interconnectivity about the way we choose to live our lives. And it really has helped. That's helped me in so many ways. And my favorite one is that some of the, I'm going to say younger people will often say, no, I just went for a run. Because, you know, it's really easy for people who've got families. They go, well, my husband was looking after the kids, so I was able to go for a run. But my counter is, well, who made your trainers? And it's like understanding, oh, there's more to I'm getting up and I'm moving than, it's not my willpower. It's all of these things that have to come into play. So this idea that we've now got in Manchester, over the time that I've worked with you, in Chorlton where we live, it's the cycle paths. I'm like, no one's going to get on a bike if they don't feel safe. So it's those pieces. And I think, I can't remember quite where I started, but that's the biggest thing for me, is to think about things as a bit more sprawling and a bit more community connected than just the individual has to go a movement. So that's what I'm looking for when we're talking about stories. They're the examples I'm looking for, because that's actually the challenge. That's the bit that we're fighting against still, is that people think that to be fit, to be healthy, it takes only willpower alone. And that's not the case, because really the culture plays in so heavily. And that, to me, that's the bit that I find the most powerful in it all, and I'm working against all the time, or working with all the time.
And that's, to what you're describing there is the work we've done around the onion diagram, the socio-ecological model. The work's got an idea to add the culture layer to that. Right? So what you're shifting people there to is that there's all these things that influence and either support and enable or are barriers to. And again, you're bringing it to life. In Chorlton, it's the bike lane. It's
there you go.
I mean, it's only the bike lanes. It's lots of things, and it's okay to give the example of the thing that you've noticed. Yeah.
And it's really difficult, I have to say to you, and I get it. Like, you asked me to do the same thing about my business, and I'm like, yeah, but there's also this, and there's also this, and there's also this. It's really hard when you're in the bottle, right? It's really, well, there's a great phrase, like, you can't see the label when you're inside the bottle. And it's so true. Like, and it's there's another analogy, which is, when you go up a mountain, you can't see the mountain you're stood on. It's like I went to Paris with my daughter in July. And I was like, we're not going up the Eiffel Tower because we won't be able to see the Eiffel Tower when we're up it, but that's the metaphor. It's like, you can't always see the stuff that's going on inside. You can't always find the story, but if you've got help and support, then you can start to pull out the examples and understand that that's the things that you need to make sure that people understand your work,
And that's another thing I would say in all of this, which is the relationship where we can challenge each other. It's so valuable. It's I might have commissioned you to do a piece of work, and you're absolutely going to tell me I need to think differently about this and challenge me, and that's what's needed, isn't it? Scott, what were you thinking on that?
I was just like drawing out that journey from, here's a load of data, we need some help with our communications, we need some help with how we to frame the problem and the solutions, and how we talk about this whole agenda. And that's 9 years of hard work, right? And team development and arguments and I think one of the important shifts to point out is just how important it has been to move to, and for wanting a better description, to actually being able to tell a more systemic story in a way that's accessible. That's where I think we've got to slowly through that hard work. It is being able to use the data and the evidence and the knowledge that colleagues have to actually start to articulate the systemic issue in a way that's accessible and hopeful. And I think that I think is quite important for people to kind of get their head around, because it doesn't just come easy naturally, does it? It's taken a lot of intervention at both personal, team and organizational level in order to be able to shift that.
And it still comes through, like when we were reviewing with the team that we just worked with, Helen, one of our coaches, was reviewing with one of the team, and the team member was like, I didn't say enough, like whole systems approach. And we're like, no, it's fine, you've done enough to say it. The stories are what count, they really do make the difference. So there's still that pull, and especially as an organization, you move into these more powerful rooms with these more like academic or political people. The draw is to go, okay, well, if I say all these jargon words that sound really big and really clever, I'm going to get the point across. And I really maintain that, I love that phrase about Manchester, we do things differently here. And I love the idea that you guys go into rooms and you tell stories and you give good examples and you invite people into the jargon. And that's disruptive. That's you doing things differently. That's what's got you here now, because you were prepared to do that, because you're prepared to have the difficult conversation, because you're prepared to ask the questions, and because you're prepared to listen. It means it just gives you that little edge, I think, which I really love.
I'm going to share this just because I think it encapsulates exactly what you just said, and it's a bit of feedback from something I did last week. Where the person who'd asked me to do the thing was to say, to talk about the blend of skills, strategic thinking, natural leadership, and groundedness.
Right.
Which they recognise is not a word, but it still counts. It's pure Manchester and made them feel proud and inspired. And that was literally exactly what you've just said there.
Yeah.
And how where there's a Nikki set of slides, isn't there, which is we need to describe the from and the to of the work and this and all of what you've just brought to life in here. So that's brilliant. I'm conscious that we've got only a couple of minutes left. I'm keen to say, if we've gone from here into here, like, where are we going next? Because we're not
Ooh.
there yet. So what are you
Ooh.
seeing and hearing that's kind
More
of,
story, Hayley. Just
oh,
more story.
there's so
More
much more
story.
to do here.
Just more story.
From both of you, little snippet from both of you. Even better.
I think what holds true is, well, I'm going to give you three. I'm going to give you the credit for being listeners, because I think it's amazing what you do. I think it's story, but evolving your examples. So you've got some good core examples. I think you can evolve them. I think there's more that could come in, and just keep being clear. Focus on that clarity. They're the three things for me, I think, that will keep you rising, because those three things will keep you relevant, and that's important.
Scott, thoughts?
I guess where my head's gone is how do we enable more to experience that journey in a shorter space of time?
Mm-hmm.
That,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of people already doing that work, right, and change, but and rather than a but. And how do we nurture that? Yeah, this, yeah. and how do we get that wider? You know, I think that's our challenge.
We could have talked. Perhaps we'll talk to Nikki about this on hers, because we're out of time. But I think that how this ripples out, because it's deep work, and I have seen how people can use it and move quickly towards it, and you don't have to go through all that pain and discomfort. You might have some personal, like, individual capability development mindset, you know, that I described, but as people doing this work, there's so many ways that I see this ripple out, and the change in language and narrative and framing, and the way that people talk about this around the country and around, I mean, even, you know, globally. You see it, hear it in the global community practice, in a call I did last week with colleagues in Australia, where, so that change does happen. You don't always know whether it came from TEDx Oldham, you know, design a movement back into life, or is that, like you've done, is it the Young Foundation, or is it Nikki, or is it me? It doesn't matter. Is it happening? Can you observe that change? But you're right, Scott. I think there's more to do, and there are ways that we've learned to create the conditions to let that ripple, like, grow more quickly. I'm looking forward to the parallel conversation with Nikki, because I'm sure, you know, her perspective would be really interesting, and I'd love to talk to some of the team about it. My challenge to you, Scott, as someone who's going to stand in our room for 2 hours with the whole team tomorrow and talk and share the latest data and trends, is make sure you're up to the job.
He's always been up to the job.
And as we were teasing some of that out just at the back end of last week, some of this came out, didn't it? About, is it but or and is it, you know, all that. So we're doing it. We're doing the work. Hey, you'll be proud of us. We're talking about you in rooms you're not even in.
I love it. But yeah, it's constantly cyclical. It's constantly reminding yourself, because, you know, when it's stressful, we default, and actually we've got to keep being brave. So that helps.
You certainly do, because I literally asked someone not to interrupt someone the other day.
There you go.
I will try harder and be better at that. Thank you so much. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Do you know how many steps you've done?
I can tell you. Also, learning about walking and talking is you actually get a bit out of breath. You've got to be quite careful.
I know this. I did a voice note on my phone the other day while I was running, and it was like, oh, that sounds awful. Is that what I sound like on the phone?
Steps. There you go. 5,000
Get
steps.
that. Well done.
Even just
well
slowly.
Done,
there you go. Job for the day.
Excellent. Well, it felt weird, but I'm glad we created the conditions for you to do it.
I know. If I'm going to do it with anyone, it'll be you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks,
Thank you both.
Thanks all.
Really enjoyed that. Have a great day.